Okay, hopefully the stream is working. This time I actually accurately wrote that I was doing an intro video, which is helpful. And it seems like we're live and good to go. Well, welcome everybody. I didn't actually put the correct intro because this is, Smoothie with Chloe in the morning. So I guess I'll tell Ernest that maybe this video can be cut up. I'm not sure if that even works well. So I've been going through this blog explained from first principles. It is not my blog. I did not write it. I want to start off with that. Ooh, they have dark mode. Thank you. Oh, I don't know what I was doing reading it on light mode before this. I do not read things on light mode. But honestly, streaming this content has not been that efficient. I was going through the number theory videos, which I'm hopefully going to continue going through number theory as a stream, but it just wasn't in a very efficient way to go through it. There's times when I have to bring on a notebook and start going through math equations. There's times when I want to take notes. And even if I'm going through it on my computer and reading through it, streaming it just isn't the most useful use of my streaming time. So I kind of went back to one of the first articles on the page. There's the internet, email, and then number theory. And I was like, okay, let me just read through the internet on stream. It's a bit like, simpler, higher level content. Well, it starts off more higher level, of course. And then, going through, routing and relaying and internet history. Anyways, I'm going to be going through this. Potentially, it'll be useful to cut up like the highlighted topics. But honestly, again, just for me to remember what I've read and what blog posts I've gone through, I like streaming the content for myself, especially if I'm just reading it and I'm not like stopping to dissect everything. So, without further ado, yeah, I'm Chloe, founder or co-founder of the marmaj Foundation. We try and leverage Web3 tech for social good, and I've been focusing a lot more on actual research recently instead of the 100 other things I've been doing. And yeah, this is kind of part of that. So, the internet explained from first principles. This article and its code were first published. I think I want to zoom in a little bit. Yeah, were first published on the 5th of August 2020 and last modified on the 21st of October 2021. If you like this article, please share it with your friends on social media. Support with a donation. I am not the writer, by the way, so me, Chloe, and me that I'm writing from are different people. You can also join the discussion on Reddit, download this article as a PDF, see what people are saying about it on Twitter, or use Google Translate or read this article in your native language. If you are visiting this website for the first time, then please visit the front page where I explain the intention of this blog and how to make best use of it. As far as your privacy is concerned, all data entered in this page is stored locally on your browser unless noted otherwise. While I research the content on this page thoroughly, you take or admit actions based on it at your own risk. In no event shall I, as the author, be liable for any damages arising from the information or advice on this website or on referenced websites. So pretty basic preface saying, hey, read at your own risk, have fun, but they did their best to help give good information, but they can't promise anything's like factually correct in any way. So I wrote this article to introduce the internet to a non-technical audience. So awesome. Even if you're non-technical, you can come here and start reading about it. In order to get everyone on board, I first explained basic concepts such as communication protocols, network topologies, and signal routing. The section about internet layers becomes increasingly technical and peaks with a dive into DNSSEC. If the beginning is too elementary for you, then just skip ahead to more interesting sections. We're going to go through all of it, of course, but I usually like the more technical sections, but it's all kind of interesting and fun for me. Due to the nature of this topic, the article contains a lot of acronyms. Many of them are three-letter acronyms, TLA, but some are longer, which makes them extended three-letter acronyms, ETLA. While I introduce all acronyms before using them, you can simply hover over a TLA or an ETLA with your mouse if you forget what they stand for. If you are reading this on a touch device, you have to touch the acronym instead. I like this blog. It always kind of gives all the information of what you'll need. It makes me feel really weird about writing blogs on the marmaj Foundation blog, but again, all our blogs will hopefully be more like this in the future. Communication protocol. So what is a communication protocol? A communication protocol specifies how two parties can exchange information for a specific purpose. In particular, it determines which messages are to be transmitted in what order. If the two parties are computers, a formal, well-defined protocol is easiest to implement. In order to illustrate what is going on, however, let's first look at an informal protocol known as etiquette, which we are all too familiar with. So if you have Alice and Bob, and they're trying to communicate with each other in a communication protocol, it might go like, hi Bob, hi Alice, how are you? Good. And then also, same way, what about you? Because in etiquette, you also want to ask a question back to the other person, and they respond, I'm fine, thanks. So the human greeting protocol. In this sequence diagram, which is what we're looking at above, it highlights a temporal dimension of a protocol in which messages are exchanged sequentially. Communication parties. It also illustrates that communication is commonly initiated by one party, so initiated here by Alice, whereby the recipient responds to the request of the initiator. So Alice starts the communication, and Bob only replies after getting a request from Alice. Doesn't just start talking off on its own, which, in real life, sometimes Chloe just goes and talks on her own. So please note this is only the case for one-to-one protocols in which each message is intended for a single recipient. Then it gives a little, a little kind of sidebar about broadcasting and information security. So just kind of explaining broadcasting. There's also one-to-many protocols for broadcasting. These are typically one-way protocols in which the recipients do not acknowledge the receipt of the transferred data. Examples for such protocols are analog radio or churches ringing their bells to indicate the time of day. Both in the case of a single recipient and in the case of a broad target audience, anyone with access to the physical medium and the right sensors receives the signal. So the church can just ding its bells. Everyone knows what time it is. As long as you have ears, you can know what time it is. If you don't have the right physical equipment, then you can't know what time it is, even if you have the bell's ringing. If you don't have ears, you can't hear how many times it dings. Same with radios and stuff like that. The difference is simply that in the former case, entities ignore the messages if were not addressed to them. If the messages are not encrypted, others can still read them, though. It's like talking in a crowded room. And if the messages are not authenticated, like talking in a crowded room where everyone sounds the same, I guess, a malicious party might be able to alter them in transit. Well, that's even just being able to copy someone. Anyways, even when messages are encrypted and authenticated, their exchange can still be interrupted. Like yelling really loud in a room when two people are trying to talk and not letting them kind of get their word across, by not relaying some message or by jamming the signal. You're keeping some messages from being shared. The properties, confidentiality, integrity, and availability form the so-called CIA triad of our information security. So cool stuff. Communication channel. So you have a communication protocol, you have communication parties, and then you have a channel that you're creating in these. So the above greeting protocols use among humans to establish a communication channel for a longer exchange. In technical jargon, such an exchange in preparation for the actual communication is called a handshake. So you handshake before you create your communication channel. The greeting protocol checks the recipient's availability and willingness to engage in a conversation. When talking to someone you have never spoken to before, it also ensures that the recipient understands your language. I've chosen these two examples for their figurative value. Why we actually greet each other is mainly for different reasons: to show our good intentions by making our presence known to each other, to signal sympathy and courtesy by asking the superficial question, and to indicate our relative social status to each other and to bystanders. Another benefit of asking such a question is that even though it's very shallow, it makes the responder more likely to do you a favor due to the psychological effect of commitment and consistency. So actually pretty important topic in Web3 in general. But yeah. If you ever want to read more into any of these things, I won't go into all of them, but you can always click them and read more about elements of precision and consistency and all that. So handling of anomalies, protocol deviation. Since your communication partner can be erratic, a protocol needs to be able to handle deviation. So Alice says to Bob, "Hey Bob." Bob responds, "Hi Alice," and then Alice goes, "How are you?" Bob's response might not always be, "I'm good," which means Alice might not be able to respond, "Ooh, I'm fine, thanks." But maybe if you hear "not good," you need to be able to respond, "What happened?" It's something different from what might be the norm. Data corruption, so sometimes data becomes ineligible in translate, for example, due to background noise. So, "Hi Bob," "Hi Alice," and then blah, 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 blah. And then, Bob goes, "Can you repeat that?" And then Alice goes, "How are you?" And then it continues with "I'm fine, thanks," and continues. So in order to detect transmission errors, computers typically append a checksum to each message. which the recipient then verifies. So again, you could dig into what a checksum is. You add a piece of data to the message, the recipient can verify. The need to retransmit messages can be reduced by adding redundancy to messages so that the recipient can detect and correct small errors on their own. So that's always amazing. So instead of having to resubmit the message back to the original sender, so instead of instead of Bob asking for a full repetition of the text, maybe there's some sort of, if there's redundancy, I guess in general, there's different ways of achieving that. But then you'd be able to not have the entire message repeated, for example, or anyways, we don't have to go into like everything. This article honestly goes into so much detail that a simple and very inefficient way of doing this is to repeat the content within each message several times. Okay, so connection loss. It can also happen that a party loses their connection. Actually, I want to get their definition, like what they talk about. Error detection, correction. Automatic repeat request. Is appropriate. The communication channel is varying. So yeah, I guess. Okay, so if you just repeat the content several times, even if you don't get one of the pieces, I just want to make sure they knew what they meant specifically. So if you just say hello, 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 and part of the hello doesn't get read, at least you've read, you've gotten the hello, so you're fine. Anyways, connection loss. It can also happen that a party loses their connection permanently. For example, by moving too far away from the signal to reach the recipient. Since a conversation requires some attention from the communication partner, abandoning conversation unilaterally without notifying the other party can be misused to block them from talking to someone else for some time. So you don't get like banned from the network just because. So it's kind of like if you're playing a video game and you leave a party, you get like docked some points and you can't join a party again for a while. But if you have actual connection loss, you don't want it. Like, I was playing like Pokemon Arena, Pokemon Go, yeah, I think. And yeah, like if you drop from a party, you could like lose incentives, and like those incentives can be given to other people. But you want to make sure that if someone's even attacking you and like you're victim of a denial of service attack, you want to ensure that like what is the reason for the connection loss, and what should the outcome be. In order to avoid binding resources for a prolonged period of time, potentially falling victim to a DOS attack, computers drop connections after a configurable duration of activity either way. So the point is, if Alice goes, hi Bob, and Bob says hi Alice, and if Alice doesn't respond for a certain number of time, Alice gets dropped, and Bob just goes, okay, bye, and communicates saying that like this is what happened, like you didn't respond, I'm saying bye. And so if Alice comes back, they can be like, oh, okay, Bob terminated it because there's a timeout period. Also, if Alice goes to try and speak to like Chloe or some other person, Bob could also share that information, be like, hey, last time I spoke to Alice didn't respond, and I had to say bye after this much period of time. And that could actually, dock against Alice in some way. But maybe Alice can prove that she had internet full connection loss, let's say, at that period of time, and just prove it. So then maybe Chloe's like, okay, I trust you, even though Bob showed me that you dropped off at one point in time because you're showing me extra stuff. So that's why cryptography is important. So network latency. Other times your communication partner is simply slow, which needs to be accommodated to some degree. So hi Bob, hi Alice, how are you? Good. What about you? And so Alice needs to wait some period of time before responding. But if you wait too long, obviously, then maybe Alice just says bye because they think Bob's not responding. So out of order delivery, the following rarely occurs between humans, but as soon as messages are passed over various hops, such as forwarding notes among pupils in a classroom, they can arrive out of order. So this is actually a pretty good example of it. like if you're trying to send notes in a classroom to each other, they're not going to arrive in order. If you're sending like, hi, how are you, what are you up to, they're going to just come in a random order. And so in a computer, because each message can be transmitted in different, to different nodes and different speeds and whatever, they can get to their intended spot at an order. Same with if you were sending mail, for example. If you sent, 3 pieces of mail using a different, carrier every hour, I guess, they might all arrive at their intended purpose at a different time, even though you sent them in succession still. They might come out of order. So the solution is to ensure all messages, is to actually, enumerate all messages, sorry, and reorder them all on arrival. So you can number all of your letters when you send them, so even if they come out of order, the person who receives them can go, okay, I have number 1 and I have number 3. I'll wait for number 2 before I actually open this. And if you if by the end of the time period you only receive 1, 4, and 3, or 1, 3, 4, and 7, or something like that, okay, hey, I'm missing some in the middle there. And hopefully you get some messages, in all of those messages you should get, like, even when someone writes a tweet thread, right? They write, this is 1, but you want to hear, like, 1 out of what, right? This is 1 out of 37. Okay, wow, there's 37 I should expect. If I miss any of these, please resubmit 16 or 23 or whatever I'm missing out of the 37 possible tweets in the thread. Lack of interoperability. So besides defining the syntax, the format, or the semantics, which is the meaning, and the order of messages, a protocol should also specify how to handle anomalies like the above. Ambiguity in a standard and willful deviation therefrom result in incompatibilities between different implementations. In combination with a lack of established standards in many areas, which often leads to uncoordinated efforts by a variety of parties, incompatibilities are quite common in computer systems, unfortunately. This causes a lot of frustration for users and programmers who have to find workarounds for the encountered limitations. But this cannot be avoided in a free market of ideas and products, which is a good thing. So the free market creates all these kind of inefficiencies and lack of interoperability. And these inefficiencies, in my opinion, create like little markets between them, which is pretty cool. So you kind of get to create like all these decentralized markets between all of these different inefficiencies. So network topology. So you have communication network. So in practice, there's almost always more than 2 parties who want to communicate with each other. So instead of just being able to call your friend, you want to have a group chat. Together with the connections between them, they form a communication network. For the scope of this article, we're only interested in symmetric networks, where everyone who can also receive can also send. Think of like, generally your phone, you can call and send. But if you don't pay your phone bill, sometimes you can only receive messages and you can't send them. I don't know if everyone knows that pain or that struggle, but yeah, that's a good way of looking at it for me. This is not the case for analog radio and television networks. Also not the same for like a church bell, for example. Not everyone can go back and tell the church they heard their message. They know what time it is right now or when mass is going to be. Where signals are broadcasted unidirectly from the sender to the receivers. In the case of symmetric networks, 2 entities are part of the same network if they can communicate with each other. If they cannot reach each other, they belong to separate networks. So really straightforward. You could think of it as simple as like, phone carriers or whatever. You're on the same network if you can connect with each other and use the same system, but there's other phone networks that, use different systems. Now, of course, they can still, interconnect with each other, and that's kind of where you have interoperability. But yeah. So nodes and links. This is kind of helpful in my opinion, just to give a very brief overview of like what these diagrams look like when you see them. So nodes are entities that communicate with each other over communication links, which we can visualize this as follows. So these are nodes, or links between the nodes. The terminology is borrowed from graph theory, where nodes are also called vertices and links are also called edges. The technical term for the structure of a network is called topology. Different arrangements of nodes and links lead to different characteristics of the resulting network, which makes sense. If you've been in school, you play with like Lego or Connects. I think Connects is probably the closest to this, where you can like take little nodes and like add different kind of connectors to different nodes and see what kind of structures you can create and how strong they'd be and what you can build. Very similar to that. A fully connected network, so a network that is said to be fully connected if every node has a direct link to every other node. So this is what a fully connected network might look like. In graph theory, today it was called as a complete graph. Fully connected networks scale badly as the number of links grow quadratically with the number of nodes. You might have encountered the formula for the number of links before, so n times n minus 1 over 2, with n being the number of nodes in the network. As a consequence, this topology is impractical for larger networks. So, very simply, if you're on a Zoom call, and everyone's on video and everyone's on audio, as you could see, it would scale inefficiently as the group grew. If you had 2 people, you're fine. 3, 4, 5 people, okay, this is great. Once you have 30 people, 40 people, 100 people, it's very inefficient to be able to get anything done in that ecosystem. Same in real life. Forget a video call, right? If you just want to get something done and communicate with, a room of 100 people, and you want to talk to each individual person, it kind of takes a long time. It's very difficult. And so you might have different topologies for different networks. So you could have a star network where everyone can just relay a message to one person and they'll get the message to someone else. So the number of links can be reduced considerably by introducing a central node, this central party which takes care of everything, which forwards the communication between the other nodes. In such a star-shaped network, the number of links scales linearly instead of quadratically like above, with the number of nodes. So each new node you add, you have one new connection. In other words, if you double the number of nodes, you also double the number of links. If in a fully connected network, you would have quadrupled the number of links. So this is arguably more efficient. For now, we call the newly introduced node a router. So this centralized node is now routing messages. So a message comes from the top node, let's say, through the link to the centralized router in the middle, and gets relayed to another node. As we will see later on, such a relaying node is called differently depending on how it operates. Nodes that do not forward the communication to others in the communication endpoint form the communication endpoints of the network. So these are the endpoints because they do not relay nodes. But in other, like mesh networks, maybe they could relay some information. So while a star network scales optimally, it is by definition totally centralized. If this central router goes down, everything goes down. It's like, one little plug going bad and all the Christmas lights going off. It's not a fun time. If the nodes belong to more than one organization, this topology is not desirable as the central party exerts complete control of the network. So you might imagine if all the houses in the neighborhood want to put up their Christmas lights, they might not want to trust on, good Uncle Bob to keep the power up, because then they might not have lights for Christmas and they want to actually have some control or some redundancy themselves. Sorry for my Christmas analogies. Depending on its market power, such a party can increase the price for its services and censor any communication it doesn't like, which you don't really want to deal with if you're in a free market. Additionally, the central node becomes a single point of failure, so more just in a security standpoint. If it fails for whatever reason, then the whole network stops working. Since this lowers the availability of the network, the star topology should not just be avoided for political, but also for technical reasons. So, it's better, I guess, potentially, than fully connected in ways. But it has just, single point of failure is probably the biggest, I guess, negative to that point, or detriment of that kind of network. Then you have mesh networks, very fun. We can avoid these drawbacks by increasing the number of nodes which can forward the communication between endpoints. So now you have mesh networks. In this graph, any of the 3 routers can go down. So the blue one here, the blue one here, and the blue one here can go down. And communication is still possible between the nodes that are connected, not only to the unavailable router. So obviously here, if the blue node goes down, you can only send nodes to the blue node, and that's not really helpful. If the blue node goes down here, well, I guess if the blue node go down here, you would be able to send messages to other nodes. But I guess some nodes still get, anyways, out of... I actually don't see... Oh, yeah, it's showing specifically for this. Like, this node like if this one goes down, it can still go this way. It did say that here again. They're connected not only through the... There are also 5 links that can break one at a time while leaving all nodes... Yes, there's 5 links that can break one at a time while leaving all nodes indirectly connected with each other. Such partially connected network allows for flexible trade-offs between redundancy and scalability. So you still can't send a message directly where you want it to go to, but you can send a message through other nodes and kind of get messages sent across where you need to. It is therefore usually the preferred network topology. Furthermore, the node marked with an asterisk, this one here, is connected to 2 routers in order to increase its availability. So not only can it send messages here to direct them to, you know, a variety of nodes here, but can also messages directly to the router here. If a message comes to the router here, obviously if this node goes down, these obviously you can't send messages, but other nodes in the network can still send messages to a bunch of other parties, and I guess you still do miss out on some nodes, but it will be harder to kind of get this node with the asterisk singled out and unavailable. So signal routing, getting kind of a little more fun with like what's actually happening, why you'd want to have a mesh router, and like how networks work, or how network addresses work. So unlike in a fully connected network where each node can simply pick the right link to reach a desired node, a network with relay nodes requires that nodes can address each other. So even if a router, I guess like the simplest example that I think is like being able to just pick up your phone and call anyone in like an interconnected network, no matter what country they're in or where they are, but like, or having to like call an operator and be like, hey, operator, I'm calling with my number, my address, but I can't reach this other address, without this help of a central or a router. So please route my message to the correct place. Even if a router relays each signal on all of its links to other nodes, it would make it a hub. Which would make it a hub instead of a router. The nodes still need a way to figure out whether they were the intended recipient of a message. So even if you send all the messages to everyone, you still need to be able to know, hey, like, was this message for me? I could read it. It's like a bulletin board. Like, okay, I can read all these messages. Like, but let's like when you're on like Craigslist and have like a missing connections board. Someone can say looking for female 32 at this shopping mall on Saturday, but you still don't really know, is this for me? So that's kind of a difficult part. You need to make sure it's very clear to all the nodes what messages are for them. But this problem can be solved by assigning a unique identifier to each node of the network and by extending each transmitted message with the identifier of the intended recipient. So instead of just being, okay, I'm looking for a female 32 who's at this mall on Saturday, they're saying, imagine just being very, very, very specific, being like, hey, this bulletin board has the exact identifier of who I want, pictures, sounds, video, camera of everything that happened, right? And then when that recipient comes on, they'll be like, wow, okay, that was me. I know for a fact, and then such an identifier is called a network address. So obviously we're not talking about like, video cameras and all of this. We're talking about computers. And so this is the network address. Routers can learn on which link to forward the communication for which node. This works best when the addresses aren't assigned randomly, but rather reflect due to the topographical signature of the network. So this is an example where you have router A, router B, and router C. You have all these links between them, so they've numbered them link 1, link 2, link 3, link 4. And so based on, the way we've numbered these, lettered these routers and the way we've numbered these links, we can now kind of give addresses to the nodes. Just be like, okay, well, this is a node that communicates with A on link 1, so it's A1. This is a node that communicates with A on link 2, so it's A2, and then so on. And I think, the example here, just, trying to be clear that, so we're all familiar with hierarchical addresses. There's postal codes, which are zip codes in the U.S. and telephone numbers with country calling codes. Strictly speaking, the address denotes the network link of a node and not the node itself. So here, they're saying that this is B2, but it's C1. In relation to B, if this is link 1 and this is link 2, then this is B2 because this is 3 potentially. It's all in relation to the router, I guess. So for this C, if this is C3 and this is C2, this would be C1. And so that's why this node here would be C1 in relation to C, but it would be, B2 in relation to B. So this can be seen in the node to the right, which is known as B2 to router B, and C1 to router C. In other words, if a node belongs to several so-called subnetworks, such as B and C in this example, it also has several addresses. Then you have routing tables, just to make things more efficient when you do routing. So the process of selecting a path between two nodes across a network is called routing. Routers are the node which perform the routing. Okay, yes. They maintain a routing table so they know on which link to forward the communication for each node. So it's like the operator that you're calling, saying, hey, I want to call this foreign destination. They not only have to know who they have to route to, which is the address, which you give them, like the phone number, but they also need to know like the cost of resources of putting you through. So if one switchboard is super full and they can't put you through to that one, they need to know another way to route you through that. And so there could be different costs for different resources and all that kind of stuff. So this table tells router A, for example, to forward all communication for node A2 on link 2. So if you have communication that's supposed to go to A2, send it on link 2, and it'll cost us 2. It doesn't matter on which link router A received the communication. They don't care. The router also keeps track of how costly each route is. I feel like my screen's oops. Did I just close the screen? I think I did. I think I like fully closed it too. No! Reopen, close window. Don't make me. No! That's funny. And now it's frozen. Now my... Oh no! Okay, now that's not fun. Closing it was one thing by accident, but having it, the whole thing freeze on me isn't as fun. I have to admit. That's so interesting. So, I wonder if my audio. Okay, audio seems. I'm just gonna have to restart the computer.